Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Changing Times and I am Dr. Zubair Khoury. In these programs, we often try to make an effort that apart from the political things and the conflict and terrorism and all that, we also keep on talking about some of the other aspects of our society and governance. And one of them is, of course, closely related with the politics is economy. You may group it as a political economy, but if you talk about pure economy, some recent developments have been made in the last week. That has been closely associated with the devaluation of the Chinese currency. Whatever the reasons behind that, but this had far-reaching impacts on international stock exchanges, international economy markets, and commodity markets as well. And the resultant effect on Pakistani economy is that the Pakistani rupee has been devalued from 2 to about 2.5%. It has come down from 102 to 104 or 104.5. The government has been taking efforts, or it has been reported like that, and the state of Pakistan has also taken some stern actions in this regard. Is this a one-time development that can be controlled with some different type of steps by the government, or this is going to be a trend for some time that is going to continue in the next few weeks or maybe months? What are the future implications for the Pakistani economy, which is starting to take some steps, which is starting to take some roots and showing some fundamentals to grow? Is it going to affect us adversely, or there isn't some opportunity also out of this situation? So we will be talking about all these developments and changes for Pakistan, and let me introduce you to the guest I have. I have Dr. Waqar Ahmed Saab. He is closely associated with economics and political economy and development sectors in Pakistan. Dr. Saab, welcome to the show. And we are also joined by Mr. Faheem Sardar. He is heading a financial institution, and he has been also writing about different financial aspects in Pakistani newspapers as well. Faheem Saab, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
May I start with you, Faheem Saab? If you look at the present situation, for the common people in Pakistan who are wondering about what has recently happened and what has suddenly happened to the Pakistani rupees, and why everybody is talking about the international stock markets, and why the Pakistani stock market has suddenly plunged in 1 or 2 days in the last week, which has been showing some historical negative trends. Can you just give us an appraisal for the common man's understanding?
Sure. The Pakistani rupee devalued from roughly 102 rupees to 104 rupees to the greenback. Now, although this is like being linked with the international events, and to a certain degree it is, but basically we've had some other aspects happening within Pakistan which are very pertinent. New taxes have been imposed, and I'll just focus specifically on the 0.3% WHT withholding tax on banking transactions, which has seen a bit of a shift of funds to other aspects, such as currency, to even the stock market. But I mean, I have to be honest here, and we're not that heavily plugged into the international economies.
Okay.
We're not investing in UST bills as maybe we perceive we are. We're not investing in the Shanghai Composite stock market as we might think we are. We're actually, and at least in this circumstance, we should be grateful to Allah, we're not that heavily plugged into the international economies, which are so, we're going through a paradigm shift. Now, what happens is people are aware, people are reading newspapers, people get to hear things. That's why people start to make linkages.
Okay.
And I just want to reiterate that yes, we do have a linkage with the international community, but it's not as direct and as intense as it actually is.
What really happened in the international market? We just want to learn about this.
Well, I mean,
international market also plunged.
Okay, I mean, this is a bit of broad stroking from my side, but you've got an economic tit for tat happening between the US and China. The Chinese stock market, the Shanghai Composite Index, which is one of the main indices of China, representing China, has gone through a massive upward movement.
Okay.
It went up roughly 150% in one fiscal year. Now, if memory serves me correctly, it was the best stock market performance in 1 year.
Yeah.
Now, that same index came down by, let's say, 25%. Now,
25%?
Yes.
In what period of time?
In these past few days.
Oh.
Let's say 2-3 weeks. And of course, Dr. Saab can correct me on this. What's actually happened is that America had been asking China to revalue the yuan upwards so that their exports become less competitive in the market and the US economy gets less of a trade deficit. Now, it is true that the Chinese stock market, which was doing so well, and it did have an extra bit of bullish trend in it, it was supposed to face a correction, but this is not a correction, this is a crash. Conversely, what the Chinese did, they have to look at their own national interest. They devalued the Chinese yuan, which was really not that acceptable to international.
How much they devalued?
Around about 4%.
Okay.
Now that 4% translates into something really big because China's economy, as we all know, is the second biggest on earth. It is, I think, the largest exporter on earth. So when you translate that into country by country fiscal trade deficits, it has a huge implication.
Okay. Let me go on to Dr. Waqar. Dr. Waqar, sir, do you want to add anything onto this? What happened in the international market? Was it that much really damaging to the international market that everything was plunging, and 25% is a huge, huge downward trend?
Yes, I think, Dr. Saab, let me start with a very recent article which our colleague Dr. Parvez Tahir wrote yesterday, that the issue with capitalism is that it really doesn't know how to deal with a crisis.
Okay.
So once the crisis is there, you don't have a solution in capitalism how to deal with it. Now there are three things at play, and the first one has been very eloquently explained by Mr. Faheem Sardar Saab. The China factor, China is now slowly starting to realize that it has limits of growth.
Okay.
Growth has its own limits,
Yeah, of course.
And now, as you saw, that the aggregate demand in the global economy was reducing, which means that Chinese exports were not that much required in the international market. The value of their currency came under severe pressure. Now, China quickly resorted to a strategy where they went from slight adjustment from an investment-led economy to a consumption-led economy.
Okay.
They have a vast domestic demand, and they started coming out with sort of nationwide schemes to increase their own consumption expenditure. And in doing so, of course, it led to pressures on currency as well, because the domestic consumers would only buy cheaper goods if you put them into lease, you put them into installments. There was a banking ease which was going on in China, and this is expected to go on. So China is adjusting. China is adjusting to the very understanding that it cannot grow on like a double-digit GDP growth rate. Number two, there are new growth poles which are emerging, economic growth poles which
within
are
China or in the region?
No, in the globe.
Okay.
So which essentially means that the overall growth milieu in the world may not be as cynical as one may sort of presume, because the growth is actually being witnessed in some other parts of the world. You are seeing it in the Far East.
Okay.
Those economies have really come up. They've shown buoyancy. You're seeing it in India now, which is slowly catching up and consolidating its position as the third and the fourth largest economy in the world. You're seeing it in economies like Turkey, for example, South Africa, even Russia and Central Asia. These economies are booming at the moment, and there's a construction boom, infrastructure-led boom, which one can say. And recent liaison even with Pakistan of the Central Asian economies was on account of the infrastructure interests which Central Asian economies have. The third and the final thing that I want to add to this very discussion before we move on is what is happening post-Greece, basically. And I shouldn't add the word post, because the Greece crisis is still there.
Yeah.
But the very fact that Greece has been given another bailout option, if one may say, and the multilateral bodies are going out of the way to protect Greece's position within the European Union.
Okay.
Now this, while it puts added pressure on the EU, or if I may say overall the Western markets, this has produced for the first time in history extraordinary pressure on the very governance of international finance institutions.
Okay, so you mean to say if the Chinese economy is readjusting its position, so it has the pressure, it has the tentacles all over the globe, that the people in other economies are also forced to readjust their position. This is what you mean to say? And they are trying to follow the Chinese economy, or they are finding some other alternatives?
Number one, they're closely watching the Chinese economy. Number two, yes, the other alternatives are already there. You have a very large population in India, Turkey, Central Asia, East Asia, which has purchasing power, basically. You know. And now when you look at the German companies gearing up their demand preferences in line with the East Asian consumers because they have the money, you readily see that the market for the future may be shifting, their market of the future may be shifting from China to other economies of the world, you know. But on the same account, you know, as I was saying, Europe, the very fact that Europe will continue to be in a crisis mode, at least in the short term, you know, this actually brings IMF or the World Bank and now the new bank which is emerging as well into picture, that why is it that a reconfiguration of international monetary system is taking place, basically.
Okay, let me just move on to Faheem Sardar. Faheem Sardar, if this reconfiguration of international monetary system, if you agree with this phrase that Dr. Sahab has been using, so this trend is going to continue? This is not going to stay here for the moment, or this windfall may affect the other economies as well and other financial markets as well?
I would actually think it's going to accelerate. Dr. Saab might agree with me because what we're seeing is, there's no specific term for that, so I'll just make it up. I actually made it up. There's a financial slide happening across this earth. If we just look at all the central banks on earth right now, all the major central banks, look at BRICS, China, Japan, America, England, India. India's in BRICS. So all of them have virtually an expansionary policy. And I mean, I just want to like draw something that Dr. Saab very rightly pointed out, and I just agree with him totally, that the Greece issue is technically not over. It's in a crisis mode, which is being given an official okay right now. Is it finished? No, I don't think so. They're trying to protect the euro, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but this international adjustment is expected to, in due course, in a couple of months, I think, accelerate, not decelerate. Why? Because China has taken a very strict view of what's happened within its own country.
Okay, another view of this Chinese readjustment, as Dr. was pointing out, that they are considering the fact at the moment that this development indicators, such robust indicators, may not sustain over for a longer period of time. They may be trying one or two options. They must have, they only have tried this one option this time and have checked the pulse of the world, how they are going to react. There may be some other things under their sleeves to bring out that, okay, we can try this one also and then readjust our policy accordingly.
Well, I mean, there's an old saying, still waters run deep, and the Chinese are extremely still, so I believe they're extremely deep. They have analyzed the fact that they have what is, which has been graded as a housing bubble. They're readjusting their interest rates, which they brought down yet again. They've devalued the yuan. I mean, they're looking at their own interests first. And as Dr. Saab had said, that they have a huge domestic consumption pattern. I think they're trying to build up on that to sort of hedge their problems, virtual problems or real problems internationally. Because right now what we see is the United States of America, being the biggest economy, is going to reassert itself. They're not going to accept a cheaper yuan there because Japan is not going to say anything, but China is asserting itself. And
so what options do they have if they're not accepting the cheaper yuan?
Well, I mean, I think they've got lots of options. Well, at the same time, so does China. I see a lot of things happening in Africa. I see a lot of things. These institutions that Dr. Saab had rightly pointed out, we're going to see a lot of activity through them now. If they were going to do something in 1 year, you'll see it happening in 6 months, 9 months. Because they're more growth-centric and less bureaucratic-centric, in my opinion. And America relies on the other institutions, not these. They're trying to now become part of this as well because they've given a green signal, okay, we're okay with the Asian Infrastructure Bank and so on and so forth. But we have to understand something, and I'm speaking purely from a business perspective because whether we like it or not, business is life. If you lose an interest, if you lose a percentage point in growth, you're going to have to recover that next
Okay.
year.
Dr. Saab, if the Chinese have something up their sleeve as well, and they are not showing their cards at the moment, for the moment they are trying this thing to gauge the temperature of the world, and in the next 4 to 6 months, they come up with a different kind of strategy. So the international markets are ready for this thing, or they may readjust themselves again, so this may continue for about 2-3 years?
I think, Dr. Saab, and continuing with the discussion which you were having, the best part about Chinese growth is that it is still very tangible. You can touch what they are producing. The global financial crisis of 2008 came because everything was in paper.
Yeah.
Right? This is not a paper economy we're talking about. The moment, and this I'm referring to an editorial.
Since they're dealing more in products.
They're dealing more in manufacturing,
Okay.
yes. Now, I want to refer to the editorial of The Economist magazine, and Simon Baptist, who's the editor-in-chief, he very rightly wrote last week that where is the 9.8% GDP growth of China coming from?
Okay.
Agriculture is down, manufacturing is down because there is a lack of global demand. It is coming from services sector, you know.
Okay.
Now, given that China has a large population which has
Yeah.
yet to become part of that high-tech services
Yeah,
industry where Europe has already reached or US has already reached, what kind of services is China producing then? And then they go on to tell us that basically it is not just the local services you see in the form of transportation, logistics, construction, for example. It is the export of services which Chinese have really accelerated. To a country like Pakistan, they're exporting engineering consultancy,
Yeah.
transportation consultancies, logistics, for example. To whole of Africa, they are exporting similar kinds of services. To the whole of Far East, they are exporting their engineering consultancies. You know, that is what China has done over the past 4 decades.
Okay.
They are masters of infrastructure-led consultancies, for example. This is actually now showing up in their balance of payments account, which is showing an increase in exports of services. You know, and this is where the 9.8% growth actually comes from.
Okay.
Now, just coming back to your question, what you were saying, you know, how, whatever they have up their sleeves, of course, economies have plan A and plan B and plan C. If they can stick to this very format of growth for another decade or so, where they are into the production of things, and there's no tendency to move towards an economy which is softer, like the Western world, you know. My own hunch is that their plan, succession sort of, to graduate from a manufacturing economy to a high-tech or a knowledge-based economy would be to actually transition to an economy where they move into designs, patents. They transform China into a hub of innovation, which is basically where states like California or LA stands at the moment.
Okay, this gives me a kind of an impression, although we all know that the Chinese economy is not purely a capitalist economy, it has its own traces or elements of socialism as well, and that has a bearing on the political system as well. But point here is, I'm just wondering at the moment, what about the people who have been getting education and training from Harvards and the Bostons and the MITs? Where are these Chinese experts and planners and economic managers are coming from?
No, that's right. Chinese have invested hugely in the HR capacity of their economic industry as well as other sectors, managers who are managing these places, you know. But I think the best part is, for them, at least it's working, everything, it may be business, it may be the NGOs, it may be the civil society organizations, even the consumer groups. They're also closely related to the party in power.
Yeah, that comes socialism.
It helps, yes,
Okay.
yes. So while they try to call it, they try to brand it as a form of market socialism, the very fact that you have a single manager at the top controlling even your NGOs, you know, it helps.
It has its own Dr. drawbacks.
It has, certainly. So the drawbacks would be in the form of voice. You have restrictions on voice, you have restrictions on accountability. So essentially there is no demand side accountability per se in its traditional definition, you know. The party cannot be challenged. If you are a businessman and you don't have linkages with the party in power, you may not be able to expand as much as your competitor would.
Okay, Faheem sir, you want to talk about something about the Chinese economy? Everybody is talking about the Chinese economic planners. Where are they coming from, and are they being taught in the Oxfordian or the Cambridgian or the Howardian schools, or they have their own indigenous or traditional wisdom that is working here?
I think it's a mix of both, and it's slightly the tilt is now going towards something more indigenous, because I'll give one example. We have Fitch, we have Moody's, we've got credit rating agency, S&P, so on and so forth. But there's also a Degong credit rating agency from China, and it is extremely incisive. They're the ones who first downgraded the United States credit rating.
Okay.
And after 2 months, I believe it was Moody's, and I mean, you see, they became market leaders, and it's got that political angle to it. I won't get into that. Like, China has, we can sense that they have the mental prowess to understand that this we need to import, this we can now synthesize in our own country, this we can copy in our own country, this we can make from scratch in our own country. They know what's what. And according to some cases that I've heard of, that you've got these high-flying graduates who are about to graduate from China in some big university, and they were already approached by the Chinese government that you come and work with us, and that's typically what should happen. We should be just doing the same thing with our own people.
Yeah, we have our own set of problems. Ladies and gentlemen, this very interesting and intriguing discussion about the international economics, particularly if they are powered and geared by the Chinese, will continue, and we will definitely be talking about some other aspects, particularly about Pakistan. But it's time for a very short break. Please stay with us.
The smiling faces of Pakistan. PTV World, changing perspectives.
The Lahore Fort, locally referred to as Shahi Qila, is citadel of city of Lahore. It is located in the northwestern corner of the walled city of Lahore. The trapezodal composition is spread over 20 hectares. Origins of the fort go back as antiquity. However, the existing base structure was built during the reign of the Mughal Emperor Akbar between 1556 and 1605 and was regularly upgraded by subsequent Mughal, Sikh and British rulers. It has two gates. One is known as Alamgiri Gate, built by Emperor Aurangzeb, which opens towards Badshah Mosque, and the other older one known as Masjidi. Punjabi language words means of masjid, or Masjidi Gate, which opens towards Masjidi Gate area of walled city and was built by Emperor Akbar. Currently, Alamgiri Gate is used as a principal entrance, while Masjidi Gate is permanently closed. The fort manifests the rich traditions of Mughal architecture. Some of the famous sites inside the fort include Sheesh Mahal, Alamgiri Gate, Nolakha Pavilion, and Moti Masjid. In 1981, the fort was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site along with the Shalimar Gardens, Lahore. Architectural wonders of Pakistan.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about economics. It's all about money and financial matters. Things are changing. Perhaps the tectonic plates are shifting, or perhaps this is just momentary development that is going on. We have to see and keep our fingers crossed. Let me just continue discussion with Dr. Saab. Dr. Saab, what about this, that Pakistan, as Faheem Saab in the first part of the program has pointed out, that thankfully Pakistan is not that much entrenched into the international financial system. These developments that we have been talking about, they have implications and impact for Pakistan as well?
Yes. So, as Faheem Saab rightly said, the financial structure is not very integrated. Essentially, it comes back to the size of the economy. Your size of the economy is not as large that you would have your funds being dealt by foreign fund managers.
There's always a bliss in something.
And then that's what is left for us. So essentially, yes, on the finance side, you seem insulated,
Okay.
But there are 3 or 4 channels through which a global downturn does affect, The first one is that, yes, a low growth outlook of the world economy means that your exports would continue to decline. They're already declining, and I understand the government is trying to do a lot, but the global commodity prices are declining. The demand is not picking up, So despite of a GSP, there's very limited that they can do,
Yeah.
The second issue is also very much related to this this phenomena, the very fact that the global economy has this tendency to bring on board those players which have some sort of security for future. Now, your medium-term outlook is that you will continue to remain a security state.
Okay.
So the second channel through which the global outlook affects you is the FDI, basically. And FDI wouldn't choose you until the time they can make longer-term investment decisions which can be locked inside Pakistan. The third channel is foreign aid.
Yeah.
So once the global economies are growing, they have greater commitments to make to the developing economies like Pakistan. You can readily see that the envelopes kept for countries such as Pakistan, even Afghanistan or other countries which are dealing a conflict situation, the aid envelope is continuously on the decline because the foreign governments have a fiscal deficit to deal with.
Yeah.
And then I would say the fourth channel, the effects of which haven't reached us, and you would know the reasons, is the remittances.
Yeah.
So the workers who work abroad, of course, once their gains reduce or they are laid off, that can also have implications for Pakistan's balance of payment, because remittances is a key driver of domestic growth.
So it's not total isolation that we are living in. We have to depend on international market. But please, pardon my ignorance on economy. If the international commodity prices are coming down, and yes, they are, why isn't it the case that Pakistani commodity prices are that much coming down? Why aren't the people getting that much relief into the daily vegetables, fruits and grains and the daily grocery item that they are purchasing? Perhaps they are purchasing at the 2 years back, that is price there is, maybe slight differences, but they are not that much drastically coming down as they are coming down in the other Western or the Far Eastern economies.
Doctor, this is such a good question, and it goes back to the standard economic theory. Prices will not come down unless supply of goods increases. The very fact that my agriculture sector is now under 3% growth rate, it is below its long-term average growth rate, which is 4%.
Okay.
My manufacturing sector, while it is trying to pick up, but fact of the matter is that whatever is picking up in the manufacturing sector is in the large-scale manufacturing. SMEs have died down due to the energy crisis, and SMEs essentially are creators of jobs. Job creation comes through SMEs, So if the supply in agriculture sector is not increasing and the supply in manufacturing sector is not increasing, this actually means that people would be getting goods at prices which would be high. You could call them artificially high. So if you look at the historical pattern of consumer price index, I tend to agree with you.
Yeah.
It is a sea change from what we saw in the previous democratic regime, if I can say.
Yeah.
The prices have come down, but inflation is still there. Inflation doesn't mean that prices have gone negative.
Yeah.
The prices are still increasing at a positive growth rate.
Yeah.
And they will only come down if you're able to revive your agriculture sector, if you're able to revive your manufacturing sector.
Okay. Faheem Sahab, do you agree with this kind of overall scenario that Dr. Sahab has painted, or his diagnosis is there? Or there may be some other factors that are responsible that the people of Pakistan are not getting minus inflation and the prices are still there?
I agree with Dr. Saab, and I would just like to add one more thing to that. These low prices are basically are an incentive for the government to continue the tax regime. In fact, as we know, they've increased taxes. So what that does is it basically is a time to gather money for the treasury.
Yeah.
So we can clearly see that they're trying to build up their reserves, our government. So they pretend like we've got this issue, we've got that issue, but basically
it's a comfortable zone that they are at the moment.
It's a very comfortable zone, but this is a temporary reprieve. This is a window that's going to shut very quickly in the near future, because right now what's happening? Oil is low, interest rates are low.
Yeah.
So in layman terminology, your costs are low. So when your costs are low, what you have to immediately do is you have to immediately build your strength up. You have to work on your infrastructure, you have to work on your marketing, you have to work on your output. If that can be done within, let's say, it can be improved in the next 6 months, then, as Dr. Saab said, supply is low, then you're basically going to build up good supply. That should help your economy in multiple ways. 1, your GDP will rise. 2, more stuff will be available. 3, your liquidity in your country will be focused more towards productivity and the real economy, rather than just putting everything into government PIBs.
So isn't it the case that this gives an opportunity to the government to introduce some reforms and take some steps that they might not take when the inflation is high or the interest rates are very high?
Absolutely. This is an ideal opportunity for the government, and I can't stress this enough, and I'm sure even Dr. Saab will agree with me that this opportunity is not going to last forever.
But why is the case? Then agriculture is going down, large-scale manufacturing is going down, textile is going down, and overall the balance of payment may be slightly better, but it's not in terms of the exports that we are doing.
I think it's partially because of your infrastructural issues. Your security has improved, which is a big plus, but the infrastructural issues are still there. We're hoping that the government can focus on those things. The objective is, I believe that governments should be living 6 months ahead of their people. They need to know what's going to happen in the next 6 months. It's a dynamic planning process and a careful execution process. If they can predict that, okay, fine, the rupee is going to face some pressures in the next 3 to 4 months, fine, then let's adjust. Already let's start doing things that need to be done. If they want to increase exports, then fine, let's start new markets. Let's find them. I use the word start. I didn't say find first. I said start. Let's make new markets. What are we waiting for?
Okay. Dr. Let me bring you back onto this so-called crisis, if you may like this phrase, but it's kind of a development, as I refer to. So Pakistani currency is feeling the pressure. Of course, there might be other reasons, that maybe flight of the money and dollar consumption, the dollar hoarding is increasing in Pakistani market. But how do you see that we remain associated with the development and rupee will devalue continuously, or there may be some stoppage of that?
I think, Dr. Saab, in your previous question, you rightly said that you may have a comfortable balance of payments at this point because of the low commodities prices, which Faheem Sahab also referred to. But due to a large reason that you have been able to build up some debt-based foreign exchange reserves.
Yeah.
You have been able to get some good loans from abroad, But you see, this is where the recent warning from the State Bank of Pakistan comes in. What SPP is telling you is that you have to start, or your repayment will actually peak within the next 15 to 18 months. You have to repay this debt, and that is when even your foreign exchange reserves will feel the heat. Now, before those 15 to 18 months come, when your repayment will be at the peak, before that deadline, your exports must pick up.
Yeah.
And if your exports don't pick up before that point, you are back into a point where we now come to your question, the currency will continue to remain under pressure,
Yeah.
Now, there are two reforms on the table, and I believe that the government is sincere in pursuing these reforms.
I'm happy to learn that it's already on the table.
It is about prioritizing them. The first is, as you've rightly discussed, the taxation reforms, and the other is the energy reform. Now, on the taxation reforms, while you have to do 100 things, let's prioritize them smartly. Let's not enter into things like tax revolt by the business community. The business community has already accepted a dozen different taxes in this budget. So now you need to come down on the table with them and agree to some of their demands as well. The point which Faheem Sardar had raised at the start of the program about the withholding tax, this has welfare implications regardless of business activity being affected or not.
Yeah, people only said it's only affect the filers and the non-filers, but it has so many different aspects that we couldn't dreamt of.
Certainly. In a very recent meeting where FBR representative was present, I was there as an observer, and the business community was in front of you, where a person stood up and said that I have recently made X million rupees of a transaction, which was quite large. Out of that, it was this much lakhs of withholding tax which was deducted. Now, you will only adjust this tax at the end of the year. Who pays me the interest rate on this lakh of rupees, or whatever return you want to get, So these are genuine issues which the government needs to sit down. On my second reform, on the energy reform again, you have come a long way in trying to at least shorten the duration of load shedding. Now, I think it's about time that our key exporting sectors like textile should get a relief, and already the winter months are approaching. The gas tariffs have been hiked. Now, there is that element in the segment in the textile industry which is saying that we wouldn't mind the jacking up of the gas tariff if the supply is there. You at least give me the supply even at the higher tariff.
What about, Faheem Sahab, the situation in the market of this news about gas coming into Pakistan, LNG? Has that improved the situation from the previous year?
Well, when the time comes, when it's there, we'll see what happens, because it just...
There has been some claims from the government that it's already in the pipes.
Well, I mean, the markets are just waiting for it to actually manifest, for it to happen. Iran is now under no particular sanctions with reference to Pakistan, so we can get gas from there as well. At the end of the day, it's about what happens, what is visible. I mean, saying something which cannot really be tested or cannot be verified and then expecting people to believe it it's hard to say. I mean, somebody, just drawing on what Dr. Saab just said, the load shedding they say is coming down. Fine, then let's prove it. Let's look at the numbers. If there is more gas coming in, whether it's from Iran or from LNG or whatever, now I'm not a gas expert, but once again, going to what Dr. Saab quoted, that if you're providing gas, people are happy. They'll pay extra for it. If you're providing electricity, as long as things don't shut down, that is the first testimony. We've actually provided it. So far, a lot remains to be seen.
Okay, we have to see that the gas coming in or the gas load shedding comes down. But how far do you see the manufacturing sector working, and how about this manufacturing sector has effects on the stock markets?
Unfortunately, our stock market is not entirely representative of our economy. It is it's slightly distant from the nerve core of our economy. So, I mean, I have to start from there. The manufacturing sectors in Pakistan, they need to be incentivized more. You need to sit down with them. You need to talk about what they want. And all of a sudden, you'll see some small projects coming up. Then you think of these mega projects. Now, the Pak-China corridor is so big that it tends to dominate every discussion. I'd rather keep that as a bonus for Pakistan. The typical Pakistani businessman, the typical Pakistani entrepreneur must be given some kind of protection. I've said it again, again and again on all some forums.
Let me just move on with this, that they must be given incentives, but you are an expert into the financial market. Now, the merger of all three markets, that has been a sudden thing? It's a breaking news for all and sundry, or this was something going on for quite some time now?
The pace of the government appears to be blistering right now, if I were to quantify it. But let's be very clear, the laws were there. The act had been enacted. There was a 2-year period. At the end of the 2-year period, the regulator had either the regulator then had the right to either give an extension or to give a direction.
Okay.
So I mean, there appears to be some kind of a way forward. So, but we have to see that the suddenness of selling it out. I just think that needs to be thought out very carefully.
Right. Dr. Saab, one last thought. What are the future prospects of Pakistani economy and Pakistani financial markets?
I think, Dr. Saab, the low-hanging fruit is cashing on the security-led the security gains that we have made. We need to show the world that a cleanup operation is going on ground. It is tangible. It is delivering for the local business community, and it can deliver for the foreign investors as well. You need to bring them here. You need to give them a feel of Pakistan so that foreign direct investment is revived. Number 2, you need to be a little more active on your regional diplomacy when it comes to trade and investment. You have $2 billion of trade with, almost $2 billion of trade with India, another $2 billion of trade with Afghanistan. One needs to be very careful that whatever security issues we have with both countries, they should not affect our business interests.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Waqar Saab, and thank you very much, Faheem Sardar Saab, for having these valuable thoughts and, of course, some intricate things that common people may not understand, but we have tried our best to put you in a very comfortable manner so that you can understand the technicalities of the people who are dealing in economics could be understood by the common viewers that we are having at the moment. Your suggestions and feedback are more than welcome at facebook.com/Dr. Zubair Khoury official, and my Twitter handle is Dr. Zubair Khoury. That's all from us tonight. A very good night. Allah Hafiz.